Nope.
Hi folks, and welcome to the Ace Tanker for the SU-122-54, and you have no idea how long I've been waiting to say that, so I'm going to say it again. Welcome to the Ace Tanker for the SU-122-54, one of the biggest curse tanks in my garage ever. It took, believe it or not, 540 something games to ace this flaming thing because it is cursed. It is cursed. No matter how many great games I've had in this tank, they were never aces. I've had games I thought were a hell of a lot better than this one in this tank, but weren't aces. And this is just one of these tanks where I just could never, no matter how well I did in this tank, ace the flaming thing. It was a soul destroyer, combination of just constant bad luck, either RT deciding to focus me and killing me, bad teams, winning or losing streak, playing my ass off and scoring a butt ton of damage and a butt ton of kills, but not enough to win any heroic medals and therefore not get the ace on a defeat. It's just cursed. Platooning in this tank, it was always a cursed tank. My platoon mates never wanted to see me hop in this tank because we'd lose. No matter how well the night was going, we could be running on a 50, 60, 70% win rate. As soon as I hopped into the SU-122-54, that win rate would plummet because this tank was absolutely cursed. And some tanks are like that, but this was the biggest curse tank in my garage. I mean, it was even more cursed than the Lick Tractor or the Like Tractor, because I haven't played 540 games in the Like Tractor, even though that's now one of the cursed tanks in my garage. This is just a tank I could not ace. It's just sometimes you come across a tank that you can't ace, and I tried everything on this tank. I tried new crews, different crew skills, different equipment loadouts. I tried absolutely everything to try and ace this flaming thing, and it just never happened until this game. And at the end of this game, I thought, yeah, another first class, maybe a second class, and then the ace popped up, and I was so happy. But this just felt like a standard game in the tank for me, and standard games were never aces for 540 something of them. So, yeah, I didn't do anything special in this tank. I just played the tank like I normally would. I wasn't sensing an ace, and yet it turned out to be one. So it's done, it's dusted, and you know what, I'm just going to play some music again. Yeah, so now, even though it was cursed, I didn't always hate this tank. I do hate this tank now, even though it's been aced. But I didn't always hate this tank. In fact, when I first started playing this tank, I actually liked it. And one of the reasons I really enjoyed playing the SU-122-54 when I first unlocked it a long time ago was because even though it's got a huge number of modules, most of those modules are already unlocked for you. So when you first unlock the tank and it's in stock configuration, it's basically a Tier 7 SU-122-54, mainly down to the gun, which is the standard 175mm a pen, 390 damage, and similar aim time, similar accuracy as the premium tank, the SU-122-44. So, yeah, it's an SU-122-44 completely stock when it's at Tier 9, and that isn't good. But usually you've got to unlock modules for Tier 9 tanks, or for any tier of tank, in order to get it up to speed with the tier it's playing in. But yeah, the SU-122-54 is a little bit different, and as I say, that's one of the reasons I enjoyed playing it when I first unlocked it, because you'll notice that the second gun here is also a gun from the SU-101 at Tier 8. So basically, if you've ground out the second gun, which is completely playable, by the way, nice rate of fire, it's 100mm, decent penetration, even for a Tier 9, decent alpha, good accuracy, decent aim time, and it's already unlocked from the SU-101, and you can mount it directly on the tank, assuming that you've, as I say, unlocked it on the Tier 8. So, yeah, that's nice, but unlike a lot of other Tier 9s, the final gun, which needs to be ground out on most other Tier 9s, is also a gun that you unlocked, if you wanted to, on the SU-101. So the final gun is the 122mm M62, which is a pretty good gun, and it's, got a rate of fire that's not quite as good as the second gun, but still okay. The DPM is very, very good. The penetration is excellent. It ranges from 258 millimeters of penetration with its standard gun, 340 millimeters of penetration with its premium ammo, 440 alpha damage, good accuracy, and the only thing that lets it down is the aim time. But this is the final gun on the Tier 9, and it's already unlocked on the Tier 8 if you decided to unlock it on the Tier 8. So, you know, what you can also do is mount this gun when you unlock this tank completely stock, because the gun can be mounted on the tank without having to upgrade anything else. Now, you're not going to have very much weight left to upgrade any of the other items until you've done the suspension, but the fact is you can unlock this tank, and from day one, game one, you can be playing it with this final gun, assuming you unlocked it on the SU-101. And it doesn't end there, because if you've been going up Russian lines, the second radio also happens to have been unlocked on the SU-101, as well as multiple other tanks, the MT-25, LTTB, T-54 Lightweight, T-44 IS-3, KV-3. You can unlock it at Tier 7. So the radio can also be upgraded to the second radio, and the final radio, again, if you've already unlocked maybe the light tank, the T-54 Lightweight, or gone up medium lines to the 416 or the 430, you've already got the final radio as well. So there's very little grinding, very little XP needed, assuming you've unlocked these modules on other tanks. And the final engine, exactly the same. So this is an engine, if you've gone up the Russian mediums, you may have it on the T-54. If you've gone up the Russian lights, you may have got it on the T-54 Lightweight. So there are every single module, bar the suspension, is unlocked on other tanks. So considering I went up a lot of Russian lines at the same time, pretty much every single module on this tank was already unlocked for me when I basically got the tank and started playing it. So the only thing I needed to do was get the suspension, which is the only module on this entire tank that is, you know, for the tank alone. So you're going to need, what was it? It is 23,000 XP, or free XP, to unlock the suspension. And you can get that 23,000 XP by basically playing this tank stock with the final gun. It's not that painful. So pretty much every other module on the tank is fully upgraded, or is already available to you if you've gone up other lines in the Russian tank tech tree. So yeah, this is one of the reasons I enjoyed the SU-122-54 as soon as I started playing it, because almost every single module was already unlocked, and all I needed to do was get the suspension, and I had a fully upgraded Tier 9 tank destroyer with little to no effort, because I'd already made that effort on other tank lines. So yeah, I enjoyed this tank when I first started playing it. But slowly, as I completed the grind and I unlocked the Tier 10, and I still hadn't aced this tank during the grind after about 100 games, and then, you know, that 100 games stretched into 200 games and 300 games, and I still hadn't aced it, and 400 games, I still hadn't aced it, and 500 games, and I still hadn't aced it, and 540, 550 games, I still hadn't aced it. You know, I just started hating this tank so much, and it's strange, because this tank is actually, you know, in some ways a tank I should like, because it's fast, it's maneuverable, it's got a great camo rating, it's got a very, very good gun, you know, they're all the attributes you want to see in a tank destroyer, you know, mobility, camo, and firepower, and this tank has them all. But just, I really started hating this tank because it has so many problems. Starting off with the hit points. Now, you can see that the hit points here are 1530, which doesn't seem too bad, but that's the second lowest hit points of all the Tier 9 TDs. So it's got low hit points for a Tier 9 TD. And, you know, when you've got low hit points and it combined with actually armor that isn't any good, I'm going to pop into Tanks GG for this. So like I say, armor that isn't particularly good, you know, these are problems that you've got to overcome. I mean, there are lots of TDs that have no armor and are quite mobile, but the armor on this for a Russian TD is surprisingly bad. You can see the lower glacis, 136, so, you know, you're a Tier 9. Not only are you going to have Tier 10s shooting at you, but Tier 7s, the lowest tier tanks, are going to be able to shoot and pen you. You know, even though it's incredibly well sloped, just like the SU-122-44 is a Tier 7, this tank, the frontal armor, sloped or otherwise, is basically only about 140 to maybe even less effective armor. The side cheeks here, even though once again they're incredibly well sloped, are again not going to pose absolutely no problems for tier 8s, tier 9s, tier 10s, even some tier 7s. Going to be able to go through these sloped cheeks on the front of the tank. So the armor incredibly poor, and not only that, but you've got this big gun mantlet that on a lot of Russian TDs is very good. It's incredibly good armor. On the SU-122 it's not, because this red ring here is the thickest armor. It's 160 millimeters, but you can see it's about 160, 170 millimeters, even though it's slightly sloped and rounded. So that can be penned, no problems. The gun mantlet itself is incredibly inconsistent. You can see that there are some areas where it seems to be quite good when it's hit on the edge or rounded areas, but then you can see other areas that aren't quite so good. It drops down to 160 here, 150 here. Again, goes up to strong armor, go a little bit further down. It goes from 300 to 400 in places, and then back down to 200 to 180. The other side, you've got 250, and again that drops down to 152 and increases as you get to the outside and hit the rounded areas. The top of the gun mantlet, again, usually quite good, is only 187, and if you're basically pointing your gun down at all, it gets even worse. So this is a tank that really can't count on its only armor, which is this gun mantlet, and then as well as armor that isn't particularly good from the front, even against lower tier tanks, you've got these large cupolas on top. So first of all, you've got a cupola over here that's only 100 millimeters thick, and even though that's quite hard to hit, this one over here isn't. This viewport over here is absolutely huge, and it goes from, as you can see, 100 millimeters up to about 122. So yeah, nothing is going to bounce on this tank. Every tank that shoots you is probably going to damage you, and not only that, but this tank is also very susceptible to module and crew damage. So you're constantly taking module and crew damage, constantly having to use repair kits, constantly having to use first aid kits, and you don't have a lot of hit points. So, the survivability of this tank isn't particularly good, but, that's not an issue for TDs when they're fast, they're mobile, and they're, good, very good camo rating like this tank has. So yes, it does have strengths. As I say, mobility incredibly good, the camo rating incredibly good, the gun is incredibly good, it's got good penetration, good alpha damage, good rate of fire, and the DPM is absolutely amazing at over 3,000 DPM, and considering that's before you add crew skills or take crew skills or equipment or consumables into the mix, the DPM can be incredibly good on the SU-122 so these are all great, the TD should be great, and when I first started playing it, I really enjoyed these things, but the annoyances then started to kick in, because as I say, the armor isn't particularly good. Also, the gun depression is absolutely god-awful on this tank. It's only got 4 degrees of gun depression, and when you consider that 2 of your biggest weak spots, your cupolas, are on top of the tank and incredibly easy to hit, even though the hull of the tank has no armor either, to use that 4 degrees of gun depression means that to get your gun on target, you have to, even when you're trying to use or in a hull down position or trying to use your gun depression, you expose some weak spots above your tank that before you can get your gun on target, and enemy tanks are easily, doesn't matter whether the tier 7s, even tier 6 light tanks, they're going to be able to pen your cupolas. So yeah, the gun depression, absolutely awful. The gun arc is tiny. The gun arc is incredibly narrow, which means that trying to track a moving target means you constantly have to move the hull of your tank. You can't track them with the gun, and that means keeping your gun on target is incredibly hard, or incredibly difficult. As I say, the modules get damaged, the crew gets damaged, the armor is terrible, the hit points are terrible, and on top of that, it's got incredibly bad reverse speed. So yeah, the reverse speed is only 14 kilometers an hour, so it means it's very difficult to play peekaboo tactics in this tank. You poke up, you've got to expose a lot of your tank with no armor and lots of weak spots to enemy tanks in order to get a shot, and then it's very slow to reverse back down into cover. The reverse speed isn't very good, so while the tank is fast and maneuverable, it gets affected by poor reverse speed. There were a lot of problems with this tank, and not to mention it's incredibly bad at shooting on the move. Shooting on the move is dreadful in this tank, just like like it is on the SU-101 at Tier 8. So, you know, this tank, the more I played it, the more these problems started to annoy me and annoy me and annoy me. So, while I did initially enjoy the tank, by the end of 540 games in it, I absolutely hated it. Now, because I've had some amazing games in it, even though it was completely and utterly cursed, I've decided to keep it. I don't know why. I don't know why, but I did decide to keep this tank because, you know, it's just a huge accomplishment to finally get this tank out of the way and done. So let's move on to the history, and this tank in-game is known as the SU-122-54, although in real life this tank was also known as the IT-122. And the SU-122-54 designation comes from the fact it came with a 122mm gun, but it was based on the T-54, so SU-122-54. So it's a tank destroyer that was designed or began design in 1949 based on the T-54, although it remained in design phase for about 6 years, and by the time the design phase had finished, the track system, initially being a T-54, was upgraded to the T-62. So it's a tank destroyer based on the T-54 using a T-62's track system. About 100 of these tanks were built from 1956 to 1957 onwards. So it did enter production. There were about 100 of them built, and there was a little bit of mystery around this tank because even though the Allies, or not the Allies, because it was the Cold War, NATO understood that this tank existed, they had absolutely no information about it. The tank was a complete mystery. They knew it was designed, they knew it was being built, but they knew nothing about the numbers being built and nothing about the tank itself, other than it was a tank destroyer based on a T-54. And it wasn't until the 1970s that the NATO finally got their first look at the SU-122-54 when it was included during the Moscow parades, military parades through Moscow in the 1970s. But by then it had passed its tank destroyer phase. It was initially designed as a tank destroyer, designed for long-range tank destroying work, which is why it was built on the T-54. It could travel large distances, bring its gun to target, it could maneuver, it was as fast as a medium tank, it could keep up with medium tanks, and it was a complete mystery for 20 years, or nearly over 20 years, until the 1970s, by which time they'd removed the gun in the 1970s and simply made this a reconnaissance vehicle. So it was still being used up till the late 1970s, maybe even 1980s in Russia, but as a reconnaissance vehicle, not a tank destroyer. But that's pretty much all that's known. Other than that, it was tested with a couple of variations of 122mm guns, and we have both those 122mm guns in the game. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the history. Anyway, we are here on Live Oaks, and an incredibly fortunate game. I didn't realize until I'm looking back at this replay how fortunate the matchup was, because it's a Tier 9 game, but there were only 2 Tier 9s on either team. I didn't realize that at the time. I don't think I even realized it when I was playing the game. So lots and lots of Tier 8s, but not only are there lots and lots of Tier 8s, there are lots and lots of heavy tanks on both sides, and that means lots and lots of XP. So, you know, top tier, only 2 Tier 9s on either side, and lots of XP on the battlefield, and I've just realized no arty, so I could afford to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more sitting out in the open in this game, and that's what we're going to do. So as I say, this tank completely cursed for me. It didn't matter how good a team I was on when I got into this tank, we would probably lose. Or I'd have a terrible game, or I'd have an amazing game, and it just wasn't an ace, and I don't know, absolute curse tank. And, you know, the SU-101 at Tier 8 was also a cursed tank. I've actually rebought, after getting the ace in this tank, I rebought the SU-101, because I didn't ace it during my original grind. So I've rebought that tank for an ace, and I've played about 12 games in it now, and nowhere near an ace in that tank yet. So I do remember the SU-101 being a slight cursed tank, but that was before I was going for all the aces. But you know, so I've gone back to try and get the Tier 8 ace now, but we've just moved up here. I've pushed down a tree to make myself a little bit of cover, and we're going to work, and we're getting shots on the 5100 in the distance, so Go for a blind shot, no idea whether it hit. Going to go for another blind shot. Oh, it looks as if I hit him. So that was a nice blind shot. I've just spotted a tank. Now, yeah, that's one thing that, another strength of this tank, which I forgot to mention, or tank destroyer, is that it gets 390 meters of view range. So the view range, exceptionally good for a tank destroyer. I mean, incredibly good. So even after the tank destroyer view range nerfs, this tank maintains its 390 meters of view range. So it's got better view range than most lower tiers and most medium tanks. But oh, so unfortunate. We've got a couple of nice track shots on the AMX 5120 and then missed one. But we're just sitting up here. We're getting a little bit of assistance damage and we're getting a lot of damage ourselves. So that's thanks to our view range, thanks to our tracking. We're just going to work here. And these tanks are being very, very helpful by popping up and accepting shots. And even though that was a hull shot in the T-32, unfortunately it fails to pen, it bounces. But we do get another one. We take out his track that time. A little bit fortunate at that angle. But yeah, we're already up to 2.2k damage. More than that because we put in blind shots. But you can see the rate of fire is decent, the accuracy is decent. What isn't decent is the aim time, and you can see me constantly having to adjust the hull. Now, you guys always ask me about equipment, and I keep on forgetting to talk about equipment, but you can see I'm using coated optics, or not coated optics, a binox and camo net on this tank right now. I'm also using a gun rammer to give me extra DPM, and an unfortunate bounce on the Indian Panzer. So yeah, I don't actually recommend binox on this tank. It was just one of many equipment changes I made to try and get the ace. It's much better to use coated optics on this tank because you're constantly moving the hull of your tank, and when you're constantly moving your hull, your binocs are never ever activated. So, you know, this was just an experiment and it seems to have worked because I did pick up the ace, but usually I'd be running this tank with coated optics. It is fast and maneuverable enough to play as a medium tank and as a flanker, but the issue is, as I say, lack of hit points, lack of armor, and you can see it constantly having to move the hull, and more tanks appearing in front. So, and then, yes, this Udez-03, completely oblivious to the fact that he's being an absolute idiot here. Yeah, let's just drive in front of the camping tank destroyer and sit in front of his gun. Again, I don't know whether people do that intentionally or whether that was, you know, just complete lack of skill on his part, but we're continuing to work, miss the hull shot, go high, but as I say, accuracy is quite good. And just waiting for shots here, playing rather passively, but as long as we've got shots, as long as we can put in shots, there's no point in adjusting my position. You know, the only reason to move, the only reason to adjust my position would be if I wasn't getting shots, or if things looked really bad on the other flank, as they currently do, but we've got lots and lots of shots here, and I just can't hit this Tiger 1. So, even though I've got a very good rate of fire, you can see that Udez beside me has got even better rate of fire, but what I do have is DPM. Now, I'm already down to one round of standard AP left. I've shot through all my AP. I did manage to get spotted, but now I'm readjusting because the shots have dried up. Once the shots have dried up, that's when you've got to move. You've got to hate players who sit there and wait for enemy tanks to come to them. You can move forward as long as friendlies are spotting for you. You can move forward to try and get tanks within your range. And I'm readjusting because we've lost the other flank and I'm not doing damage anymore. So just gotta swing around, gotta try and help this IS-6, and that shot goes so high, and I just get spotted again. This 1390 must have an incredibly good crew because I was right at the edge of his view range there and he was able to spot me. And my shots are now starting. This is the gun starting to let me down, and this is where I started feeling the tank was cursed again because we've already done 3,000 damage. And I'm thinking this is either going to be a loss or the gun is going to let me down. But IS-6 manages to keep the 1390 spotted. He gets taken out. Enemy IS-6 at the distance, don't have much to shoot at. Tiger 2 up here, just out of my render range, but gonna go for a shot at the turret. You can see now the accuracy is letting me down. So, our IS-6 goes down. So we've lost our eyes, and this T-49 is going to be able to outspot me. So I need the T-54 Mod 1, the RU-251, maybe the YAG Tiger to move up. I am still on full health, but being on full health in this tank really doesn't matter that much when your armor is terrible and you've got no hit points. So Anyway, IS-6 decides to advance, and the gun just not performing. And yeah, the curse is coming back. I'm looking back thinking, alright, Super Pershing, do I have to help him against the T-32? Do I really have to? No, I don't. I don't have to help him. Okay. So Tiger 2, T-49, and IS-6. Now, only 3 tanks left on the enemy team. I'm still on full health, and I decide, you know what? Let's just go for it. T-49 could do major damage to me. Knock out a lot of crew and a lot of modules, but he's still sitting where he was last spotted. We're moving up. You can see 4 degrees of gun depression. Gonna try and use some bushes here, but nope. Okay, we're gonna go for it. T-49 is the priority. I need to take care of him because even though I'm up against heavy tanks and I'm in a tank destroyer, I can actually outmaneuver those heavy tanks. You can see that we're doing 40 kilometers an hour on really rough ground. ORU-251 comes up to support me. I thought I'd be on my own. And I've exposed myself to the IS-6, who's sitting hull down and manages to fire without getting spotted. That was really surprising. But T-49 gets taken out by the 251, and I just decide to go for it. Even though the IS-6 has got shots on me, we're going to swing around, going to try and do some damage. And you can see the penetration of the gun. No problems going through the upper glacis. Oh, Tiger 2 takes out the 251, but we're going to swing around, take him out, take another shot from the IS-6. But as I say, I conserve my hit points, and there he is. So we're just going to put a little bit of distance between myself and him. He did get spotted that time. And we're up to 4k damage, plus whatever assistance damage I did, 4 kills, so no Top Gun in this game, and you know, this is feeling like an average game. It really is feeling like an average game. I'm not thinking ace at all, but IS-6 moves up, we're able to sneak a shot in before he reverses back down and to finish up with 5 kills. So yeah, wasn't expecting anything at all, but then this popped up, so we ended up picking up an ace, we ended up picking up high caliber. And incredibly happy. I basically had given up hope of it ever happening, and you know, it didn't feel like an amazing game. I did 4k damage, 5 kills, finished up with 1340, which may, you know, it may be a little bit higher than I normally get, but I've definitely hit 13 in this tank plenty of times, and it hasn't been an ace, so I wasn't feeling an ace, and it did surprise me. But we also managed to do, as well as the 4.3k damage, we managed to do about 2.6k assistance damage, and I think maybe some of that's down to the fact I decided to switch out the coated optics for binocs and got lucky with a few spots. But you know, once again, I'm not complaining. The gun, even though I do like the gun, it's got terrible aim time, but the accuracy is okay, the penetration's okay, and the alpha damage is quite nice. The DPM is amazing, but we fired 26 and only managed to hit 17, so the accuracy in that game did its best, did its absolute best to deny me the ace, but it worked out in the end, penning 13 of 17 shots. As I say, happy with the assistance damage, damaged 8, destroyed 5, and didn't earn that many credits because I was running a too many premium rounds, I guess. The ammo costs came to a huge amount. No premium consumables, but yeah, I fired through a lot of my AP very quickly and ended up having to fire a lot of premium ammo as a result, and therefore only picked up 4,700 credits with a premium account. So not amazing. Wasn't my first game of the day. As I say, sometimes I just got sick of looking at the tank in my garage. I decided to sit down, play it in a series of games like I usually did, and failed to get the ace. But this time it did happen. So not first game of the day, but yeah, this is a tank I loved, absolutely loved when I first started playing it, because it's, you know, you've got most of the modules unlocked for it already. If you've gone up Russian lines, various different Russian lines, and you can unlock basically the final gun from playing the SU-122 or SU-101 at tier 8. So yeah, most of the modules are already unlocked, or were unlocked for me. The only thing I needed were the tracks, and you can play this thing stock without the tracks and the final gun if you want, assuming you've unlocked it on the SU-101. So it's a very pleasant tank to play. I mean, the speed, the camo rating, the DPM, the alpha damage, the penetration, these are all good to have in a TD. It's just, it's got no armor, no hit points, too many weak spots, no gun depression, no gun arc, and sometimes the gun is a little bit derpy accuracy wise, even though on paper the accuracy is quite good. Oh, and the reverse speed is terrible, so gun depression is terrible. Yeah, it's just so many problems. So yeah, it's a tank I initially loved and then grew to hate, but Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just a little bit like being in an abusive relationship, in that even though this tank, this tank treated me badly sometimes, it also treated me quite well sometimes. So, I guess I decided to keep it. I don't know why. Maybe to see now once the ace is gotten, maybe the curse is broken and I can start enjoying the tank again. I don't know. But anyhow, I hope you guys are having better luck with your cursed tanks than I did with the SU-122 54. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.